Welcome to Copilot Podcasts. The router sitting on your kitchen counter right now, the one you bought to stream shows and check email, is already capable of identifying who is standing in your living room, tracking their movements through walls, and doing all of that without a camera, a microphone, or your consent. Today, we're getting into home surveillance technologies, specifically Wi-Fi-based radar-style tracking, what it actually is, how it's already being deployed commercially, and what the regulatory picture looks like. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how this technology works, why the privacy stakes are higher than most people realize, and what you can actually do about it. I've got someone here who has been deep in this topic, so let's just get right into it. Walk me through what is actually happening with Wi-Fi and surveillance.
So the core concept is called Wi-Fi sensing, and the way it works is actually pretty elegant in a kind of unsettling way. When Wi-Fi radio waves travel through a space, they don't just go from your router to your phone in a straight line. They bounce off everything, walls, furniture, and people. And when they bounce off a person, they create a distinctive pattern. Researchers figured out that by comparing the expected signal pattern to what actually arrives at the receiver, you can infer a lot about what's physically in that space.
So it's like the Wi-Fi signal is essentially painting a picture of the room?
That's almost exactly how researchers at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany described it. Professor Thorsten Strufer from KIT's Institute of Information Security and Dependability put it this way, and I'm quoting directly here, By observing the propagation of radio waves, we can create an image of the surroundings and of persons who are present. This works similar to a normal camera, the difference being that in our case, radio waves instead of light waves are used for the recognition.
Okay, so radio waves instead of light waves. That's a striking way to put it. But I think most people's instinct is, fine, that sounds like a research project, not something that affects me right now.
And that's exactly the misconception the KIT researchers are pushing back on. Their findings, published in May 2026, make a really stark point. Every Wi-Fi router already in millions of homes contains the hardware needed to perform this kind of sensing. It doesn't require new equipment, special firmware, or any visible modification. The capability is already there.
Wait, so the router I already own right now has this built in?
According to the KIT research, yes. And here's the part that really changes the calculus on this. You might think, okay, I'll just turn off my phone when I want privacy. But Professor Struve specifically addressed that. He said, and again quoting directly, it does not matter whether you carry a Wi-Fi device on you or not. It's sufficient that other Wi-Fi devices in your surroundings are active.
So turning off your phone does nothing?
Nothing. Because your smart TV, your thermostat, your neighbor's router, any active Wi-Fi device nearby generates enough signal activity for the system to work. You don't have to be carrying anything.
That's genuinely alarming. And I think what makes it feel different from, say, a security camera is that there's no visible indicator. There's no lens to notice, no blinking light.
Exactly, and that's the point Julian Todd from KIT's Castell Institute made. He said, this technology turns every router into a potential means for surveillance. If you regularly pass by a cafe that operates a Wi-Fi network, you could be identified there without noticing it and be recognized later, for example by public authorities or companies. And the KIT team drew a direct parallel to Cambridge Analytica, the idea that, like Facebook's data harvesting, Wi-Fi sensing extracts behavioral data from devices people assume serve a completely different, single purpose.
The Cambridge Analytica comparison is a really interesting frame because that situation was so jarring, partly because people thought Facebook was just a social network, not a data harvesting machine. And now the same logic applies to your router.
Right. The device you bought to connect to the internet is also potentially a surveillance device. And the KIT researchers are explicit that there is currently no legal requirement for disclosure or notification to homeowners that this capability exists or is being used.
Okay, so let's talk about what's actually happening commercially, because this isn't purely theoretical anymore, right? There are companies already doing this.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really concrete. Xfinity, which is Comcast's major telecom brand, has been rolling out a feature called Wi-Fi Motion since the start of 2025. It lets users turn their existing internet-connected devices into motion sensors. Your printer, your smart fridge, your Xbox, all of them become passive sensors.
Your Xbox is a motion sensor now. That's a sentence.
It really is. And according to Cybernews, the sensitivity is high enough to detect small movements, like the wave of a hand. The system works by detecting signal disruptions between the router and stationary devices. When someone moves through that space, the signals shift. Xfinity's own support page describes the sensing area as an oval between two devices, not a straight line, so it covers a pretty wide zone.
And this is free? Like, it's just a feature that showed up?
At no extra cost, yes, for users with a compatible Xfinity gateway, the Technicolor XB7 model or later. You select up to 3 Wi-Fi connected devices in the app, and it sends push notifications when motion is detected between them. Cyberhoot described it as digital echolocation meets ghost hunting minus the slime, which I think is actually a pretty accurate description.
Okay, I actually kind of love that framing. But here's where I want to push a little, because on the surface, this sounds useful. Like knowing if your dog walker actually showed up, or if your teenager got home on time. What's the actual problem?
The problem is in the data. Xfinity's privacy policy states that the company collects motion activity and information when the feature is turned on. And here's the language that set off alarm bells in a Hacker News discussion about this. Xfinity's own support page says, quote, "Subject to applicable law, Comcast may disclose information generated by your Wi-Fi motion to third parties without further notice to you in connection with any law enforcement investigation or proceeding, any dispute to which Comcast is a party, or pursuant to a court order or subpoena."
So the motion data from inside your home can be handed to law enforcement without you being notified.
That's what the policy says. And it's not just law enforcement. The Cyberhoot analysis laid out several exploitation vectors that are worth taking seriously. One is occupancy mapping. Wi-Fi motion data can tell intruders when you're home and when you're not. Another is domestic abuse. A controlling partner could silently weaponize motion alerts without the victim ever suspecting they're being tracked, because there's no camera to notice.
That domestic abuse angle is something I hadn't thought about at all, because the whole pitch of this technology is that it's invisible, no camera, no microphone, but that invisibility cuts both ways.
Exactly. And Cyberhoot also flagged behavioral analytics. ISPs could use anonymized motion data to study habits. On its own, maybe that seems harmless, but combined with smart speaker voice data, shopping history, and other behavioral signals, it starts to build a very detailed picture of how you live.
So it's not just one data stream, it's the aggregation that becomes the problem.
That's the core issue. And it's worth noting that AT&T routers are also equipped with motion sensing capabilities, according to analysis published on LinkedIn by a software engineer who looked at the commercial landscape. So this isn't just one company experimenting, it's becoming a standard feature set.
Let me ask about the other side of this, though, because I don't want to just frame it as purely dystopian. There are legitimate use cases here, right?
Genuinely, yes. And this is where the technology gets interesting in a different way. Researchers have been exploring radar-based indoor monitoring for elder care, and the results are pretty remarkable. A study published in the journal Sensors looked at ultra-wideband radar systems for monitoring elderly people at home without cameras. The system could detect posture, recognize specific movements, and even detect small chest movements remotely, like coughing. The classification accuracy achieved was more than 99%.
99% accuracy from a radar signal. That's wild.
And the motivation behind that research is real and pressing. The study cited demographic data showing that the ratio of people needing care, elderly and young, to working-age people is increasing globally. The idea is that radar-based monitoring could help an elderly person living alone get help if they fall, without requiring them to wear a device or be watched by a camera. That's a genuinely compelling use case.
So the same underlying technology that could be used to covertly map your movements could also be what keeps your grandmother safe if she falls. That's a real tension.
It's the central tension of this whole space. And there's even research using wireless radar frameworks combined with deep learning to evaluate sleep apnea severity in home settings, published in the Journal of Multidisciplinary Healthcare. So the medical applications are serious and being actively developed. The technology itself isn't inherently good or bad, it's the deployment context and the consent framework that determines which one it is.
Which brings us to the regulatory side, because I think a lot of people assume there must be rules about this kind of thing. Is there a legal framework?
There's a partial one, and it's worth understanding what it actually covers. The FCC regulates radio frequency devices under 47 CFR Part 15. That's the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. It sets out technical specifications and administrative requirements for devices that emit radio signals. In 2023, the FCC issued a final rule specifically expanding opportunities for unlicensed short-range radar devices to operate in the 57 to 71 GHz band, what's called the 60 gigahertz band.
So the FCC is actually opening up more spectrum for radar devices, not restricting them.
Right. The 2023 Federal Register entry describes it as a significant step in the continuing expansion and evolution of FCC rules, designed to supercharge the development and deployment of new and innovative radar operations. The FCC explicitly cited safety applications, like detecting unattended children in hot cars, as part of the rationale. So the regulatory posture is largely permissive and innovation forward.
And what about the privacy side? Like, who's regulating whether companies can collect and share the data that these radar systems generate? That's the gap. The FCC rules govern the technical operation of the devices, the radio frequency emissions, the power levels, the coexistence with other unlicensed technologies. They don't govern what happens to the data those devices collect. And as the KIT researchers explicitly noted, there is currently no legal requirement for disclosure or notification to homeowners that Wi-Fi sensing is being used. The technology operates invisibly, and the legal framework hasn't caught up.
So the FCC is essentially saying, here's how you can build and operate these radar devices, but nobody is saying, here's what you can do with the data you collect. That's a pretty accurate summary of where things stand. And it's worth noting that the KIT researcher Felix Morsbach made an interesting point. He acknowledged that intelligence agencies or cybercriminals currently have easier ways to monitor people, like hacked security cameras or internet-connected doorbells. But he said Wi-Fi networks pose a unique concern precisely because they are nearly everywhere and largely invisible. The ubiquity is the problem.
The ubiquity is the problem. That's a really important framing, because we've kind of normalized having cameras in our homes, doorbells, baby monitors, security systems, but those are visible. They're there. This is different. And that's the shift that I think is genuinely new here. Traditional home surveillance, the kind reviewed by security experts at places like security.org and safehome.org, is something you opt into. You buy a SimpliSafe kit, you install sensors, you set up cameras. The consent is built into the purchase decision. Wi-Fi sensing doesn't work that way. The infrastructure is already in your home, and the question is just whether someone activates the capability.
And you might not even know when they do. Exactly. And through-wall radar research, which has been published in journals like Remote Sensing, has been developing for years, originally for military and law enforcement applications like search and rescue. The academic literature describes passive through-wall radars that exploit Wi-Fi access points as opportunistic illuminators. That technology has now matured to the point where it's moving into consumer products.
So this went from military search and rescue tech to your Xfinity router feature. That's a pretty fast pipeline.
It is, and the commercial accuracy is already significant. According to analysis of current capabilities, commercial solutions can detect movement within 0.5 to 1.2 meters of accuracy. And with AI being layered on top, advanced algorithms can now decipher radio wave disturbances to create detailed human figure reconstructions. That's not a future capability. That's where things are right now.
Detailed human figure reconstructions from your router. I keep coming back to that, because the mental model most people have of their router is it's a box that makes the internet work, not a device that can reconstruct a 3D image of you.
And that gap between the mental model and the technical reality is exactly what the KIT researchers are trying to close. The comparison they keep making is to Cambridge Analytica. People thought Facebook was a social network, not a behavioral data harvesting operation. The same dynamic is playing out with routers.
Let me ask a practical question then, because I think people listening are going to want to know what they can actually do. Is there anything?
There are a few things. Cyberhoot's security analysis recommended segregating your IoT devices onto a separate network, what's called a VLAN, or Virtual Local Area Network. The idea is that your smart fridge and your Xbox don't need to be on the same network as your laptop. It limits the attack surface. They also recommended strong access controls and multi-factor authentication to limit who can view motion data.
So basically, audit what's on your network and who has access to it.
That's the starting point. And for the Xfinity Wi-Fi motion feature specifically, it's opt-in, so you can simply not enable it. But the broader point from the KIT research is that the passive sensing capability exists regardless of whether you've opted into a specific feature. The hardware is there. The question is whether someone is actively using it.
Which is a pretty uncomfortable place to land. You can opt out of the feature, but you can't opt out of the hardware capability.
Right. And that's why the KIT researchers are calling for stronger privacy protections, not just technical ones, but legal ones. The technology has outpaced the regulatory framework, and the consent infrastructure that we rely on for other forms of surveillance doesn't really apply here.
I want to sit with that for a second because I think it's the most important thing we've said. The consent infrastructure doesn't apply. We have a whole mental model of surveillance, cameras you can see, devices you choose to install, features you opt into, and Wi-Fi sensing kind of breaks all of that.
It does, and the dual-use nature makes it genuinely hard to regulate in a blunt way, because the same technology that could be used to covertly track someone's movements in their home is also what could detect that an elderly person living alone hasn't moved in several hours and might need help. You can't just ban the capability without losing the beneficial applications.
So the answer isn't this technology is bad, it's this technology needs a consent and transparency framework that doesn't currently exist.
That's where the researchers land. And it's worth noting that the FCC's regulatory posture, expanding spectrum access for short-range radars, enabling more applications, is moving in the direction of more deployment, not less. So the pressure for a privacy framework is going to increase as this becomes more widespread.
Okay, so when you step back from everything we've covered, the KIT IT research, the Xfinity rollout, the elder care applications, the FCC rules, what's the actual takeaway here?
Here's what this really comes down to. The surveillance infrastructure for your home is already built. It's in the router you bought, the devices you connected, the network your ISP manages. The question isn't whether this capability exists. It does, and it's being actively deployed commercially. The question is, who controls it, under what rules, and with what transparency?
And right now, the answer to all three of those questions is mostly not you.
Mostly not you. And that's not a reason to panic, but it is a reason to pay attention. Check your ISP's privacy policy, specifically what they collect when motion features are enabled and who they can share it with. Audit the devices on your network. And when you see news about Wi-Fi sensing research or new router features, understand that this isn't abstract tech news, it's about what's happening inside your walls right now.
And I think the thing that will stick with me from this conversation is that quote from the KIT researcher. This works similar to a normal camera, the difference being that in our case, radio waves instead of light waves are used for the recognition. Because we have a whole set of social and legal norms around cameras. We know what it means to be on camera. We don't have that yet for radio waves.
And building those norms, legal, social, technical, is the work that needs to happen now, before this technology is so embedded that it becomes impossible to regulate meaningfully. The KIT researchers published their findings specifically to accelerate that conversation.
We started this episode by saying your router is already capable of identifying who is in your home, tracking movement through walls without a camera or your consent. And I think what's clarified for me is that's not a warning about the future. That's a description of the present. The router on your kitchen counter isn't just connecting your devices, it's a sensing device. And the norms for what that means haven't been written yet.
Which means the people who understand this now, who know to check their privacy settings, who know what Wi-Fi sensing actually is, who can read an ISP's privacy policy and understand what the motion data clause actually means, those people are in a fundamentally different position than everyone else.
And that's exactly why we made this episode. Thanks for being here for this one on Copilot Podcasts. Go check your router settings and maybe give your smart fridge a suspicious look on the way out.